to Marty Party.
A sort of guerrilla reporter, Nick Shirley, went to Minneapolis and basically pressure tested a bunch of different Somali-ran daycares around the city. And, according to the video that he published to YouTube, a lot of what looked like nefarious activity, maybe people that weren't completely on the up and up. Taking government money, taking taxpayer money to run an operation that is not what it is supposed to be. And that's really troublesome. This is on the heels of a larger discourse around the Somali community in Minneapolis and Minnesota and across the nation, especially as we look at the border crackdowns that are going on, ICE operations around the country, a lot of varying opinions out there. And it's definitely top of mind for a lot of people. So being from South Dakota, right next door, Minneapolis was kind of the nearest city to us. My brother was a paramedic in that city. My sister-in-law, a nurse in that city. My mom lived just outside of the city for quite a while there. I go there on a regular basis, have a lot of friends there. So I'm not a Minneapolis native by any stretch, but I am fairly familiar with the city and what's been going on over there over the years. And generally speaking, so number one, let's just cross this off the list. Anybody who thinks that the Somali refugees that came in the last, let's call it recent history, like last 5 years or so, that's not the case. Most of them came over around the time, if you remember the Black Hawk Down incident, Mogadishu, 1993. It was around that time frame, those early 90s, where a lot of the Somali refugees came over because there was horrific things going on in Somalia. And as we often do in America, we let a certain amount in and try to give them a new shot at life. Coming from a place where the only real option was, being a part of a militia, working for a warlord, committing atrocities, or being a victim of the aforementioned folks. And that's a shitty situation to be in. And so a bunch of them came in. The Midwest in general, the hometown that I grew up in, Huron, we've I don't live there anymore, but my hometown has welcomed in a lot of refugees over the years. The Hmong from Vietnam, the Karens from Myanmar, and there was some. I think in the early days there was like assimilation issues and some grumbling and stuff. But I would say the Midwest in general, South Dakota, Minnesota, they've always been, North Dakota, I believe, even falls in this category. They've really been willing to take in a lot of refugees whenever that's on the table. And a lot of that is through the Lutheran churches. I grew up in a Lutheran church, and a lot of them are the ones that have said like, hey, yeah, bring them in. We'll help take care of them and things like that. Or at least that's the way it used to be. I'm not completely sure these days. So when we talk about the Somali community in Minneapolis, which is significant, we're not talking about a couple hundred people here. This is a significant portion of the population of the city. We're talking about a large group of people. And I think anytime you're talking about large groups of people, I am always hesitant to paint in broad strokes. Like, I don't want to say every Somalian refugee that has made a home in America in Minnesota or Minneapolis is a bad person or has bad intentions or anything like that. I also don't want to paint with broad strokes and say they're all good people. They're not. Like any community, they've got good people, they've got not so good people, and people that are up to no good and things like that. So I think this is a complicated issue, and we got to be careful not to just paint the entire group of people as, what are they doing here? They're all in on the corruption. They're all committing fraud. I don't think that that's the case. Okay. But there has been issues in Minneapolis for many years at this point. There is a crime problem. It's not just the Somalians, many of whom now that community, younger people, they're born in America. They're full on Americans. They're not naturalized or anything like that. They were born in America and they're Americans now. That's many of the people in that community. But even the ones that did come over on refugee status, over the years, now we're going up on 30, 35 years. A lot of them have been here. There have been issues in the city. There have been systems that have been put in place to support that have been overburdened. It takes a lot to support a refugee community, especially one that grows like that one did. And there has been crime that has happened. They're not the only source of it. Not by a long shot. I've heard my brother talk a lot, who, again, he was a paramedic in working some of the worst parts of the city. And I know that they're not the only ones causing issues. Some of them are, for sure, but they're not the only ones. And, when we look at this fraud that's going on, so Nick Shirley's documentary, I think it feels like it frames the situation like this is newly uncovered information. I think that's partially true. And the reason I say partially is because this fraud has been going on for a while now. There have been prosecutions. I think I saw one statistic where it said that there's been around 80 prosecutions, about 50 convictions, and all of that. So it's not something that was completely unnoticed. But what I would say is, was it getting national attention? No, it was getting local attention. I mean, you can look up the local newspaper articles and stuff from the Star Tribune and in Minneapolis there and other places. Was mainstream national media covering it? Not on a very regular basis. And I think sometimes those stories go underreported because reporters don't want to come off like they're painting like anti-immigration or anti-refugee or anti-minority or racist or any of those other things, right? And then the people like Nick Shirley that do cover it are called those things by some groups of people. Neither is right. But it has gone underreported for sure. And most people are coming to this information brand new, and it's new information to them because it has been underreported. So, Nick's article or documentary had a big impact. It was watched by a lot of people. It's been shared by people like Elon Musk and the Vice President of the United States, and it's got a lot of people's attention, and a lot of people have a lot of takes on it. And a lot of the things that have been said are like, good thing for Nick being out there. Where are the other reporters that, where's the media that should have been reporting on this? Well, again, there are news stories out there, but what hasn't happened, and this is where I want to give Nick some credit here. He went out and actually started knocking on doors. He really did that shoe leather reporting that used to be mainstream. And as we've seen local papers disappear, local reporters disappear, and the entire news media start to, be completely, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Be completely moved into New York City, Washington, D.C. I mean, those are the two big ones. And then L.A. and a couple of other major cities. But New York City and D.C. are the two big ones for sure. And things like just look at the entire institution of journalism was surprised by Donald Trump winning the election in 2016, right? The 2016 election. And that's because not enough people are out there in the towns and the cities really getting to know America. And so Nick went out there and was like, yeah, I'm going to go sort of boots on the ground, go walk around and just report what I see. And that's what he did. And I think we need more of that. And I even saw a follow-up where CNN was saying, they interviewed him on the street or something like that. And then said they were working to verify his claims, and they showed a reporter, kind of sitting at a desk and calling a bunch of different places. I'm like, yep, see, that's the issue. That's the difference between what most of the journalism institution is doing. They're working from behind a desk. They're making phone calls. They're doing internet research, things like that. They're not actually out there pounding the pavement. And that's what Nick did. And I think there needs to be some credit there. And I think that more newsrooms need to do that. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of individual journalists that want to get out there, that want to get out on the ground, want to get out from behind their desk, but their editors won't let them, or budgets don't allow it. And because a lot of the local papers have shut down, it requires travel from one of these other places to go to one of these places. And that requires budgets, and budgets in news media are extremely tight right now. So a lot of times the best thing that you can do, the only thing that you can do, is pick up the phone and start making calls. So I understand how a lot of people might want to get out there and do what Nick did, but for a variety of reasons, they haven't. And that's where a guy like Nick comes in and gets after it. Now, is he as seasoned of a reporter or journalist as anywhere else? No. Is he like many journalists? A lot of people are like, well, he's biased. He's a MAGA reporter and stuff like that. Well, yeah, I think he does have a political bias. But if I'm being completely honest, the days of the completely unbiased reporter feel like, it feels like those guys and gals that population is getting smaller and smaller. And there's a lot of activist journalism that's out there, a lot of reporters that feel they have a moral duty to cover stories from a certain angle instead of in a completely unbiased way. And in that regard, even though he's on the opposite end of the political spectrum from most of the journalism industry, he's doing the same thing. He's coming into these situations with preconceived notions, preconceived ideas, political leanings, all of that. Right. And that's where it can feel a little bit of gotcha journalism. Some people I've seen online saying like, oh, he went to these daycares before they were open, or, it's some random dude walking up to a daycare asking to see the kids. It's like, would you let them? Like, those are somewhat fair questions to ask, I think, and say, and, does that completely invalidate everything that he found, though? No, I don't think so. Not by a long shot. But it does reek of that little bit of gotcha type of journalism and community editing. But to act like Nick Shirley's the only guy that's ever done that, like, get out of here. Like, that's not the case. That's literally not the case. That's happened at many, many institutions, many of the biggest papers out there, and news media for sure. That is a common thing. They've gone out there. It's just, again, it's usually coming from the other end of the political spectrum from what Nick Shirley is. For me, I was a journalist for a long time. I consider myself more of just an author now, but I do journalism in my work as an author. I'm not going out there and writing daily news anymore. I used to be the editor-in-chief at Task and Purpose. I was the editor-in-chief at Coffee or Die magazine that did a lot of really great reporting over the years. And I freelanced and wrote for a bunch of different places prior to those times. I was the editor-in-chief at the Havoc Journal too, but that was more of an opinion essay platform than news like Coffee or Die or Task and Purpose was. And those publications were all very specific to the military, veteran, first responder communities, intelligence communities, that sort of stuff. So this is, a topic that I'm somewhat familiar with. I've worked with a lot of journalists out there. And, I always strive, despite growing up in a very conservative household in South Dakota and growing up fairly conservative. I think anybody that, went to school with me growing up, K through 12, would be like, oh yeah, Marty was like a hardcore Republican and stuff. I've since come, I think, again, I don't know. I'm very aware of the fact that I don't know what I don't know. And so it's hard for me to be completely beholden to one party or one political movement. I find things that I like and agree with or disagree and dislike about both ends of the political spectrum. If you were to list out all of my different opinions on individual issues, I don't know, I'd probably fall somewhere in the middle. Some people watching this might say, oh, so you're a fence sitter. You're just somebody that doesn't want to. No, I'm aware of that. I know that I don't know everything. And a lot of times things that are initially reported end up not being true. And that is true on both sides of the political spectrum and in news media. And so I've seen politicians on both sides of the aisle do heinous, horrible things in the name of this country and on behalf of this country. I went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm far from some like war hero or anything like that. I have 0 valor awards, anything like that. But, I got to look back at my time in Iraq particularly and say like, oh, that was something that just I was completely misled on. And I was the biggest supporter in the world of that thing, And so it's hard now after being duped like that to come around and be completely entrenched in some political opinion, because I've seen how quickly the ground moves beneath you. And I can't be beholden to that. So as a journalist, I got a point here. As a journalist, when I was doing news reporting, I really tried to be objective and approach everything from a very neutral standpoint and remove my biases on any specific topics from the equation. I'm sure I wasn't completely perfect, but I really tried. I tried to be my own devil's advocate. I would actively argue against myself on and act against my own opinions and morals with greenlighting certain stories. And that was my way of saying like, okay, I'm being objective. I'm holding myself to the standard I want to hold other people to. I don't think a lot of people are even in the news media are even striving for that these days. If you are a journalist out there seeing this and you are one of those people, good on you. I know you're out there. I just think that those numbers are shrinking and more people feel like they need to report on behalf of their morals and what they see. And I think that's a slippery slope. I really do. I think we need more people out there, maybe people that aren't as biased as maybe Nick Shirley is on certain things, doing what Nick Shirley is doing. Like follow his lead, get out there and start asking questions, hit the pavement, talk to people. They're not going to bite you, you put yourself in some situations and they might, if you go out and cover protests and, go into dicier areas of certain cities, maybe, there's some danger involved, but like, that's the job of a reporter. That's the job of a journalist. So I applaud Nick Shirley for doing, what he did and doing the reporting that he did. And I think as he said in an interview of like, hey, I showed you what I saw and you guys can go do your own analysis. And yeah, go out there, go look. And there's lots of people out there trying to give context to certain things. And that's great. But he's the one that got the conversation going. And it is an important one. There is fraud going on. And although there have been convictions, although there have been plenty of, people prosecuted, I don't think it was even a drop in the bucket of what should have been happening. And I know Minneapolis is not the only city that is affected by this. This is something that more cities and more states need to take seriously. And in the past, you can go back and look at how different cities, I'm up here in New Hampshire, just barely an hour north of Boston. Look at Boston. They had to grapple with the mafia for years. Whitey Bulger, all organized crime, all of that, massive fraud, and it's still happening to this day in many cities around the country. So this is something that we need to continue to shine a light on. We should have, federal, state, and local law enforcement going after these folks and trying to make sure that our taxpayer dollars, when they're funding daycares that don't actually exist, that aren't actually taking care of children, like that's a shame. Shame on us for, allowing a system like that to continue when so many people pay so much of their money into the tax system thinking it's going to do good, and it does do a lot of good. I'm not like an anti-tax person or anything like that. But it's something that we need to be confident when we pay our taxes every year. And everybody, if you're a W-2 worker, you have money taken out of your paycheck, every single paycheck, regardless of what your income level is. There are taxes withheld. You might get a lot of that money back depending on your income level at the end of the year when you file your tax return, but that's really just a 0% interest loan that you make to the federal government. And so at minimum, even if you're getting that money back, even if you're getting that 0% interest loan paid back in the form of a tax return in March or April April or May, whatever that is, then what am I talking about? Most people get their W-2s and file in like January, and you're getting tax returns as soon as end of January, early February. So yeah, we need to know that when we are paying taxes in, that they are being used in a good manner and for the reasons that are legally allowed. And Congress sets the budgets, Congress does appropriations, and we need to hold them accountable too when those things aren't happening. Another big one is, there's fraud going on in Minneapolis. Man, the Pentagon hasn't passed an audit in Years. It's been years. So this is happening even at the federal level in some of our biggest institutions. You know, the military is one of the biggest line items in the United States government's budget. And the fact that they still can't pass an audit, like, that's not great. That is not great. And part of me thinks it's because certain things are being hidden within those budgets. And if they pass an audit, they're going to have to own up to certain things that money are being spent on. Use your imagination. Like, you're probably not wrong. Hold on, I need a little bit of another coffee here. And that's a shame. And so, yeah, do we need these daycares investigated in Minneapolis? Yes. Do people that are not American citizens who are not acting in a manner that is appropriate for being a guest in this country need to leave the country? Yeah. I mean, if you're breaking the law and you're not a citizen, then you probably need to leave the country. I'm not against deportations or anything like that. Again, I think there's a right way to do those. And there's a lot of opinions out there on what's going on. We've needed to get tough on immigration for a while now. We've needed to tighten up who we let into this country for a while now. It's been a problem across multiple administrations. Multiple presidents of both parties have said it's a problem and that they are going to try to tackle it. They've all had their own different approaches, but it's been a problem for a while. And I also want to make sure that we're careful. Like I said, in the case of the Somalian community in Minneapolis, many of them are American citizens because they were born here, and they've got all the rights of any other American citizen. And if they're breaking the law, then they need to go to jail, not get deported necessarily. Not a fan of this idea of denaturalizing people either. If they were naturalized citizens, once you're a citizen, you're a citizen. I really believe that. So I'm not a big fan of the people that are suggesting that. But it needs to happen. So Nick Shirley, good on him for getting out there and trying to do some old fashioned on the ground reporting. Totally understand if you're on the other end of the political spectrum, or oh, he's biased, and yeah, I get it. But, go out there and start doing the same style of reporting and do it the way you think it should be done. But I'm not going to be the critic that throws stones at a guy that went out there and went and got after it. Minneapolis has, they got a lot of things to deal with. Minnesota does. Tim Walz, again, do I think he should be thrown in jail or something? No, because prosecutions have been going on. Does he and the rest of the political establishment in Minnesota need to be held accountable in some way, though? For sure. Should these people be reelected when this has been going on under their watch? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know why you would vote for them when this stuff has been going on for as long as it's been going on. I don't know. I'm not a citizen or a resident of Minnesota, though. I don't live in Minneapolis. So, it's not going to be my fight, but I'm watching it closely. I go back to the city on a regular basis. I care about the people there, and hopefully this gets cleaned up. And we'll wait and see how that develops over there.
It's a Marty party.